today. We're going to hop right into the questions, and we're going to start off with,
oh, yeah.
what does it mean to identify as a Muslim?
That was the question I was going to ask you to delete.
Really? Oh, I'm so sorry. We can
I mean, it's a fine question, but I think we can get right into the meat of, what I can speak about. But I'll let you continue with your next question before I do that.
Yeah, no problem. So I would really like for you to explain the work that you do and how that aligns with your Islamic identity. I think the work that you do is amazing, and I kind of want you to go ahead and go about that.
Well, thank you, Hannah, for first of all, for inviting me and opening the space for this conversation, which I think is really important. One of the things that probably a lot of people don't know is that there are a lot of Muslims using psychedelics. And so it's a very, especially younger Muslim populations, and it's particularly important for us to open that conversation so that they can have context for what they're doing and reconcile, their angst around it. So basically, I'm a healer. I practice Islamic medicine and a few other forms of traditional ancient medicine. And it's basically all about, the work I do is all about bringing people back to themselves, which is the first step in the return to Allah. And another way we might put that is to authenticity, to integrity, to what each soul has been sent to this life to bring to the table, the contribution each soul has been guided to make, that is essential to fulfillment. And you can use the word destiny if you want. It's not about doing stuff in the world. It's about being in right relationship with yourself and with the very essence of your being. So where medicine comes into play, medicine is the grease on the wheel, the hamburger helper, if you will, to help us find that alignment, to be grounded, centered, aligned. And now I'm speaking a little bit in abstraction, but we can get very specific. So what's fascinating about the desire, the yearning that people have for experiences of expansion and ecstasy that we get through a lot of different experiences. Someone watches, a basketball game and they experience a certain amount of ecstasy. Another person eats chocolate. For another person, it's their chai. For others, it's intimacy. And plant medicine has that effect. And it's no accident that plants are really master healers. And they're not just, chemical constituents. They're not just roughage, but they are actually living beings. They have consciousness. They have intelligence and wisdom to impart to us. And so that shouldn't be taken lightly, right? We're not just eating a bunch of vegetables on the plate. And then, of course, certain plants have very powerful effects and are particularly masterful in their healing possibilities. So human beings, across the board, believers and atheists and secular people, we seek out expansion in life. We want to feel good. And there's a reason for that. From a spiritual perspective, we're actually wanting to get close to the divine. And the closer we get to the divine, the more ecstasy we experience. And in the experience of ecstasy, we come undone usually in a beautiful way, and we are reconstituted, and we remember what it means to be alive and to care deeply about something and to feel, and the clouds and the cobwebs get cleared. And it is essential that we do that on a daily basis to renew and revive our sense of self and purpose, and to get in touch with spirit again. So to the extent that we lose touch, we get caught up in the monotony of daily routines. We forget what really matters. We forget why we wake up in the morning in the first place and get out of bed. People who lose hope and vision and possibility in life, when they wake up in the morning, they stay in bed. They really have forgotten why, why even bother getting up in the morning. So we seek out expansion, we seek ecstasy, and the practices that spiritual people do on a daily basis are precisely designed to help the soul ascend to the divine. And then when the prayer is over, we come back. But we're not the same. We are more essentially authentic, right? We're in the fitra, we're in the essence of our beings. And it's really the outer layers, the accumulated dust of forgetfulness and waywardness, it is sloughed off until it accumulates again. And that's really the nature of life. Things get dirty, things get dusty, and every day we have to keep dusting things off. If you're the kind of person who only cleans your house once a year, it is a project, because that dust turned into a crust. And then you got to pull out the Brillo pad and you're scraping stuff off. But if you're the kind of person who attends to the soul and the mind and the body on a daily basis, and it doesn't have to be arduous, just that little bit of daily engagement, then at the end of the year, when you do your annual house cleaning, it's really not a big deal. When you do your annual review and your life review, when you have your pilgrimage, your Hajj, and you sort of account for your entire life, then it's not a big deal. But the people who wait till the last minute, well, then it's a whole other, ball of regrets and, unresolved bitterness and broken relationships, unrepaired, and so on. So it's fascinating to me how people seek out ecstasy and expansion within and outside of faith-based contexts. And so there are so many ways in which we medicate ourselves unconsciously to resolve anxiety, depression, hopelessness, despair, boredom. Boredom is a big one, especially. And with short attention spans and rewired nervous systems from TikTok and all these other addictive platforms, we easily fall into boredom, which was not as big of a deal in antiquity. People of old were very much absorbed in nature. They were in touch with the natural world, and everything was fantastic from that perspective. And the more removed we are from nature, the more we are thirsty for feeling the aliveness of being once again. And so people are medicating themselves, and sometimes those medications have a lot of adverse effects. Sometimes it gets people in trouble. And so we really need to first correctly diagnose the situation. Before you can really know what you need, well, you have to understand what's going on in the first place. So there are a lot of people who smoke, for example, and smoking, as we know, basically causes cancer. Sorry to burst the bubble for those who didn't know, but it's about time that people are aware. I mean, of course, it's all over the packets at this point. But some people really use it therapeutically. I would say most people do. And it's their means of taking a break, catching their breath, coming back to themselves and getting centered, and then returning back into the routine of the day. It's unfortunate, however, that it has those other effects, but it's important for us to acknowledge that there's some skill in that. And as soon as you give that person a better means of doing the same thing, they'll take it. And there are plenty of sort of non-toxic means of doing that. And spiritual practice is designed exactly to do that, to help people ground, to center within themselves, and then, of course, to align with the sacred. So part of the challenge with psychedelics is that too many people use it as well as other things, you know, like detox is a big one. A lot of people, detox is such a wonderful word. It sounds fantastic. Who doesn't want a detox? But detox has its requirements. So if you go on a detoxification protocol and you're already deficient, then you are going to get yourself into trouble, actually. You're going to go further into deficiency. And for some people, that means collapse. So before we prescribe something, first we have to understand, you know, to correctly diagnose the situation. So that means you have to have some sense of who you are. When I'm looking at people, I want to know who they are and how they are in life. That determines what the medicine is. And in the course of my clinical practice, I saw too many people who used psychedelics and were damaged as a result of their use because it was untimely. They were unprepared, their bodies weren't ready, and some people psychologically come undone, and other people just have a horrible experience. So there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And these kinds of containers are still being built. And there are a lot of places where people go and they actually get further traumatized, because today there are a lot of facilitators of these experiences who basically have no training, either spiritual of any rigor or clinical, to know about the risks, and also to go through the rigor of, you know, the study of ethics and how to approach these. And these are conversations I'm in with different therapists who are using psychedelics with their patients, that they're just seeing a lot of, you know, non-clinical, non-expert application, you know, and having, you know, very adverse results. So I'll pause there and I'll let you actually say something here.
No, thank you so much for all of that. I took a lot of it in, and I kind of like the way you said that there's a way to use it, because this goes hand in hand with a lot of the struggle that Muslims in the psychedelic community are going through. Is it haram or halal? And I think for me personally, the way I think of it, I'm no Islamic scholar, but it becomes haram when you use it without intention. And you spoke a lot about that when you were just explaining it. And it's almost like you need to have like intention and to guide you through the whole entire process. Otherwise, people are entering it without having any knowledge of how to use it, and that goes into safety. And if you're not safely using it, that's where it becomes haram. And so it's important to use it in a clinical setting, and also educating yourself on how to properly use it. And so in that same breath, how would you feel about intention for even non-Muslims? Because this goes hand in hand for everybody.
In a lot of spiritual settings, everything is done with intention. So mealtime is silent. Mealtime is meditative. When you're in the kitchen, there's no casual conversation allowed. Usually people will be chanting while they clean and while they cook. So absolutely, this is critically important, which is what is the reason to do it? Is there a good reason? And too often people just grab these things like it's a Skittle on the table or something, candy. And again, it's important to understand that these plants are master healers. They're incredibly powerful. They have consciousness. They have wisdom and messages to impart. And in the same way that if you approach a holy person and you don't know why you're going to see them, you don't have anything good to say, you don't bring the proper adab, the proper spiritual etiquette, then you're probably going to get a talking to. And so the people who aren't ready and they just go on a good idea are the ones who are more likely to have a negative experience. And I would say that that's maybe what they needed to have as their first lesson. But the more that you prepare yourself, which is to say, what are the most important questions in my life today? What is it I really need to look at and to evaluate? And again, usually that means within our own souls. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, that Allah does not change the condition of a people until they look within themselves. And everyone wants that bliss, but really the key to finding aliveness and bliss within, which is actually the essential state of the fitrah. The fitrah exists in a state of bliss. If a person isn't feeling that consistently, it means there's a lot of garbage on the heart that needs to be cleared. The great power of psychedelics isn't the destination. It's actually how they facilitate the journey, which is to identify all the garbage that is accumulated over time. And this is really breakthrough medicine. So when someone is given a mental health diagnosis and prescribed a pharmaceutical, it usually has the opposite effect in that it dulls them. It does not open sensory portals, and it creates a chemical situation to simulate normalcy in one's experience of life. Because being out of balance, the person feels abnormal. But they do not become smarter, wiser, and more in touch. In fact, they feel less. And people on these sort of, these substances, pharmaceuticals, report to me that they are less in touch with their intuition, their inner voice. Whereas plant medicine has the opposite effect. It will put you front and center. And if you weren't already prepared to see what you needed to see, then it can be a rude awakening, a slap in the face. And the preparation is all about getting you to a place where you're ready for a breakthrough, to see what you need to see, and to then integrate it, to embody, right, to get to the next level. Some of the plant medicine teachers are gentle and soft, and others are, they have a sharp sword, a sword of truth, and they chop the head of deception and delusion off. And if you're really attached to that, that head, then it hurts when it comes off. Now, every naturally occurring substance is medicine for something, including poison. Poison is medicine for something. And the most powerful medicines are derived from the strongest substances that are in their natural state and at certain dosages poisonous. But in the right context, with the right preparation, it's powerfully medicinal. And again, it's all about what is indicated. Is this right for this person in this moment? And what's right for you today that works great, tomorrow may not be the right match.
I'd like to expand upon that. I used to be on medication, and for me personally, it worked at first, and then I found that it didn't resonate with my body. And a lot of comments that I've been getting throughout this series is kind of like, okay, well, don't do psychedelics, go get medicated. But a lot of these medications have so many adverse reactions. And people say that, okay, well, psychedelics are so haram and you are not allowed to do this. So just pray and forget about all of your mental illness. And I once saw a statement, and it was kind of like, we don't die for the religion, we practice it. If you were in the middle of nowhere and you had nothing to eat and you were going to die, we are allowed to eat pork if that was your only option, because we can't, it's a sin to let yourself die, to hurt. You can't hurt yourself. It's not allowed. And so in the same context, when I found that the medication was not working for me anymore, and I found another way to heal myself, that was basically my way of not sinning and taking care of myself and not harming myself. And I think a lot of other Muslims maybe feel like not the same. Exactly. We don't die for the religion, we practice it. I thank you for bringing that.
I'm glad you're eating those.
That's exactly how I feel. It's a little hard to multitask sometimes, but I actually did want to ask a question. about how we can maybe get Islamic scholars to research this topic of permissibility so that other Muslims are able to feel comfortable consuming these substances. Do you have any sort of idea how maybe we can go about doing
Before
that?
I answer that, I want to just speak to one thing you said. To all my beloved Muslim friends who drink coffee every day, I hate to break it to you, but you are a user. And I don't say that as a reproach, but again, to put things in context, if Muslims are using, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, that is incredibly strong. They are not meant to be used for more than a few weeks. If you begin to use those substances for over a month, you are very much in danger of lifetime dependency, and you can basically never get off. And one of the most common adverse, I don't even want to call them side effects, because they are as primary as the effects for which the medication is prescribed. One of the adverse effects of those medications is suicidal ideation. And that's not an accident, because it's not facilitating you coming closer to yourself to see what you need to see, but has the opposite effect. On some level of your being, you're going deeper into despair and hopelessness. You may have an outer affect of functionality, but the spiritual disconnect is actually being deepened. So they are not any solution at all. They are useful temporarily to help a person get functional as a more holistic solution that includes other things that then should get you off of the pharmaceutical at some point. But too often these things are prescribed, and the person just stays on it. So now to get to your question, which is, to paraphrase and correct me if I'm wrong, how do we engage scholars on this subject of the fiqh and permissibility of plant medicine, psychedelics? Well, the first question I would ask is to be really clear about why we need to. And then what is it for this? What is it ultimately for the sake of? Because there should be some kind of, in the same way that police are here to protect and serve, there should be a kind of collaboration, communication. And the way that I've seen it happen is that someone goes to a scholar and they have to educate the scholar about what the scholar doesn't know. So what does that mean? So first we have to gather our evidence, all of the, empirical and scientific evidence about the benefits of these substances. There are many things that we actually eat that have psychotropic effects, coffee being one of them, chocolate, many things. And we reach for these things, and it's not accidental, because again, feeling good brings hints of proximity to the divine, that sense of being in a paradisal state. And Allah gave us these things to remind us. Chocolate is really a divine substance. It's not accidental, and yes, you can analyze it, biochemically. It has magnesium, and magnesium, it goes to the heart, and it opens, from the perspective of traditional medicine, it opens the energy of the heart. So does the fragrance of a rose. And these things are not accidental. So well, hopefully what would happen from this conversation is scholars watching it will engage and inquire and be curious. And really good scholars understand that we are being bombarded by new questions in every era that requires fresh perspective. So as soon as the internet was created, then we had to reckon with it, and we had to look at it carefully to say, what are the questions we now need to consider with this new experience that human beings are having? I mentioned to you in our introductory conversation that in this town where I live, there is a couple who did a research project and wrote a book on psychedelic plants in the background of Christian icons throughout history, especially in the medieval era. So in the various traditions, psychedelics are featured in the sacred works of those traditions. And again, that's not accidental, as portals to contact with the sacred. So there are people out there who are looking into this, and you know, once you connect with the right people, I would just engage them in conversation, and we can provide some fresh perspective, which is needed, instead of the usual boilerplate, you know, which is really based in ignorance. You know, and I would say that's not, it's just circumstantial. It's not ill-intentioned. The scholars I know are very thoughtful, and the case just has to be made. Now, here's something to consider, which is one of the advantages of lack of regulation is access. One of the disadvantages of lack of regulation is danger. That access, of course, brings risk. And when you have settings with unqualified people, enough of the time people get burned somehow. Then there are the disadvantages of regulation, which is limited access, you know, gatekeepers, and more rules, and more stringent qualifications for the people using them or facilitating those experiences. So we need to find a balance. It is better, it is much better if the community of people advocating for psychedelics with spiritual roots and not just trying to use it in a sort of biochemical way, themselves get together and create their own standards for the ethical use of these things. Because if you leave it to the government, then they're going to come in and you're not going to get that spiritual perspective. And it's really the spiritual elders who should be guiding these things ultimately, because they're providing the complete perspective. As soon as you bring in a scientist or a government official, then everything gets sort of, the life gets squeezed out of it. And so if we don't create the container and share it with all those communities around the world who are advocating and using, then eventually the governments will step in. Yeah.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I just want to quickly answer this question for someone. What is the name of that book you mentioned about that couple that live in your town?
I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but I'll find it. And what we can do is, I'm sure they have a page, and we can just post it on your Instagram page. Yeah, in
the comments or something. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have to close this up because it's 3:30 already, or
no
12:30 Pacific time. But thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, and I took a lot out of it. It's a good reminder of why Muslims are allowed to do this, or should be allowed to do this. We can become more spiritual from it, and I want to extend that conversation to other people in the community that are feeling a lot of guilt, because I did feel that guilt at one point, and I'm sure you did at one point too, because it's a lot of questioning of your faith and am I doing something right? And I think by expanding this community, we can really reach those Islamic scholars, and they're thoughtful, intelligent people. And I'm sure if we can make a good case of them, they would be more than welcome to, explore that and maybe give us a good answer on it. So again, thank you so much. I would love to collab in the future. This was an amazing conversation. And I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all the questions, but thank you so much for everybody who
Thank you, Hannah. This was great. Will those questions be saved, or do they disappear?
Yeah, I was actually typing them. I was typing them up on a little side. So what I'll do is, I can figure out a way to, I'll drop my email in the chat, and everybody who has that question, please feel free to contact me through there. And then I'll connect you to Ilyās, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to drop my email right now, and then we're going to close this up. It's going to be henna@shakruna.net. That's henna@shakruna.net. That's pretty much it. Thank you all for showing up and supporting. Much appreciation, and have a great rest of your fast.
Thank you, Henna. Take care. Have a great day. Bye to everyone. Thanks for joining. Till next time. Walaikum assalam.